Yeah, and we had a bit of a connection problem there. I don't know what it was, but I think it's probably just everybody trying to get on and do things tonight. We've got a few interesting comments. Toby says, feels like relegation for some teams such as Worthing FC. Can't see how you can stop a season with over 75% of the games played. Very good point from Toby, Charlotte. 75% of the games played and we're stopping a season. But we have to put the world in context right now. It's such a difficult decision. I'm sure anyone that ultimately made that decision was going to find that really difficult.
Yeah, I really sympathise with the likes of Toby, and this news must really hit hard for clubs and supporters who were really looking forward to a promotion running. But I think, like you say, the context of this and the importance of people's safety, the logistics, and one point I think that is important to make is that the last couple of weeks have been particularly stressful for hundreds of volunteers across the country whose task it is week in, week out to provide a facility and to run a football club with no sort of idea about how the season's going to look. For those that have contracted players, how on earth they were going to get them to play into June. And I think ultimately, if you were to talk to those people, they would argue that this is probably the most sensible and fairest decision, despite how kind of heartbreaking it is now
Yeah.
for those supporters. I think when we look back in a year's time and we see the scale of the pandemic that we're going to get through as a country, I think everyone will agree that it is tough to draw a line under it, but it is probably the best and most sensible decision.
Okay, right. I think we can go to the phone lines now. Very good evening to you. Welcome to Back of the Net. Who's on the line?
It's Sean.
Sean, sorry about that, Sean. We got there in the end. Hopefully, Charlotte can hear you now as well. So
Hopefully.
Yeah, she can. Brilliant. Right, we're all on, and it's all good. So don't panic. Carry on. That's what we've been saying all week. So, Sean, who do you support, and what's your opinion on today's announcement?
I'm a South Shields fan, and I'm bitterly disappointed and gutted. I don't agree with it. You can say it's biased if you want. That's fine. I just don't agree with how you can call a season off after 80% of the season's done. We were, 5 games away from winning a league. There's other teams within the non-league structure that had gained their promotion, but are now being told, no, you can't. It's a bit messed up. I mean, you've also got to look at the financial side of it. South Shields has been known to invest quite well into the setup of the football club. The fans, we've travelled the length and breadth of the country, following them everywhere we go. I mean, the last game we had, there was over 3,200 people there watching the match. And yes, we're going to get that opportunity now to relive that next season, potentially. But it's not what we wanted. We wanted, obviously, to go up and progress. And now we've been denied that opportunity. All we wanted to do was to see the non-league threat in the same way as the Football League and the Premier League. We don't know what's going to happen to that. Why couldn't we wait until the same time that the Football League and the Premier League had announced what was going to happen to them?
You make some really good points, Sean. And what I want to ask you first of all is apart from waiting, which I completely understand, what alternatives would you have liked to see put in place? Bearing in mind, as many people have said, 75% through the season. What were the alternatives for the league?
The only other way you could have really done it was 2 ways. You could have gone a points per game ratio, which we were the only club that had over 2 points per game ratio, or you could have just delayed it and potentially gone and turned around and said, the season will restart in X amount of weeks, delayed until I think the Premier League delayed it until the end of April. So why couldn't we have done the same? I know there's the issue with player contracts and the finances and whatnot, but now you're looking at certain clubs. Look at Morpeth Town. They had a lot of games postponed over the winter due to the adverse conditions and the condition of their pitch and the poor drainage. They have now lost out substantially more than what we would have lost out on, because they had a lot more home games. Have lost that revenue now. We've had more home games than them. We've got a little bit more, left over in the pot to see us through. But what about something like that?
As a fan, Sean, we were talking on Monday about the whole of non-league structure, including the National League, and saying even the Football League, would supporters rather this season was finished, no matter what it meant for next season? So if it meant next season every club had to just play each other once, and you might play some teams at home and some teams away, and you got a season next year because it would run from, let's say, October to June. Would fans rather have seen that and actually finish this season, bearing in mind the passion, and especially with a club like yours that has gone through this season and the expectation? Would that have been something that you would have agreed with?
Yes and no. A few of us have been talking, saying that we potentially would have preferred to play next season, but don't have the cups. You know, I'm saying the cups. Everyone wants the FA trophy. That one's fine, you know. But you've got like the local ones that we're involved in, and the likes of Nantwich and stuff like that. They're involved in the Cheshire Cups. We're in the Durham FA Challenge Cup, and then you've got the League Cup. Was there a need to play all them, or could you have just got bypassed that for one season to get this season done? Let's not forget there is also teams on the opposite end of the scale. Yes, we wanted to go up. Believe it or not, there is teams there that probably need to come down for their own financial benefit. Now they're going to have to stick out another year of going from Blythe all the way down to Gloucester. I mean, they had a midweek game in Gloucester, and I think a round trip was something like 600 miles or something.
Yeah.
So, could Blythe really have thought to do that?
Yeah, it's the finances, I think, again, one of the big worries. Charlotte, I just bring you in here to talk to Sean. You were mentioning that as well, that the financial side of this was always going to be, other than the fact that of promotions and achievement, but finances as well. How do you work it out so that clubs actually can get something out of the season and carry on to next year?
Yeah, I think Sean made a handful of really, really valid points there. And one that I made on Tuesday night is that actually I think the football associations and the leagues really need to consider the sheer volume of games, like you say, with the amount and number of cup competitions. What value do they bring to non-league football? And I think that's the point here, is that the non-league game is different to the professional game. And the simple reason why non-league can't wait, it doesn't have the money. It hasn't got the luxury of the millions that the Premier League have, and the EFL have been able to write out a £50 million relief package for their clubs. Non-league football doesn't have that, and I think it really was a case of making a decision for the non-league football community to help with the financial sustainability of it. I think that is brutally what it comes down to. And the points per game, again, I personally don't think it's very fair, because you can get into so many different arguments, can't you? If you're potentially like the Ishmael League, where I know Worthing and Cray Wanderers, it looked like, and Folkestone, there were so many teams battling for it. Well, hang on a minute, you've had more home games than us, or your run-in's awful for the last few games. I don't know whether that would have been the solution either, but I think it really does boil down to money, and this decision was made, I would have suspected, with a lot of feedback from clubs, in order to make sure that not only do they survive this summer with a massive financial impact, but that they can kind of go on and survive for the next few seasons. And I don't think the Premier League we will be seeing the Premier League for a couple of months either, if I'm being brutally honest.
But will it expose the results in the Premier League like they've done with the non-league football?
I know.
Are they going to deny Liverpool the title like they've denied South Shields and Vauxhall? And potentially you look at the divisions above, because they haven't decided what's going to happen with the National League South and the National League North and the National League itself. There could be still things moving between them two, so why stop it at the steps what we're at now? They're still deciding what's going to happen with the other two.
Yeah, I think
the decision has been made because the feedback from the football clubs across the pyramid has been to say that if this decision doesn't get made, we won't be able to survive. You've got so many tricky things about, do you pay your players throughout April when there will be no training and no games? you then probably have to undertake a 2-week period to condition players back to being in a position where they can play again. I don't think it would have been as simple. I mean, the thing is, this is also unprecedented anyway. Obviously, we're on a daily basis watching the leaders of our country kind of give us updates on this situation. So to try and forecast when teams would play, I think anyone would have thought the April deadline was premature. But ultimately, it comes down to money, and I certainly think the Premier League could have done more. I think they've been far too quiet. For my liking, and I think that should have filtered down into non-league, and then maybe there might have been some way of doing it. But I feel dreadfully sorry for the volunteers who run football clubs like yours, who have put in hours, and the players, and all the people that support them and have put their pocket and money into this. But I do think if it hadn't been made now, we would have seen a lot of clubs fold entirely.
Sean, I want to finish, but because I know that you're absolutely gutted tonight. And I want to make that point now that this is awful. It's a world pandemic, and I realise that this is probably the decision that has not been taken lightly. I'm sure there are people from the leagues watching and thinking, well, you try making this decision. It was very tough. But I think the key points here to get are that the Premier League sets an example for everyone in football. It is. Everybody looks up to the Premier League, whether you're a player, a manager, even fans, directors of clubs. That is what you aspire to. That is the big level which everyone's looking at now. And I get Charlotte's point was a good one, which was, decisions have to be made to save these clubs. But I think the Premier League did need to come out and perhaps make a statement and do something, because, like you say, if you see the likes of Liverpool being awarded the title, it's almost as if they don't care about the small clubs. They don't care about South Shields.
That's the way it will be seen. That's exactly the way it's going to be seen, though. It will be seen as it's all right for the big fish, but the little fish can just forget about it. I mean, let's not forget some of the players that have been in non-league and that are currently in non-league who are much, much better than what, people believe they are. Jamie Vardy, he's come through the non-league, and you look at Barley Mumba, he's in South Shields at the minute. So the non-league's vital, and for the Premier League to essentially just keep the mouth shut, there's been very little come out, from the Premier League and the Football League. I mean, you've still got Bury's place in the Football League to be taken up, so that's all to be sorted out. It's not a decision I would have liked to have made. I guess in a couple of weeks' time when I've settled down or whatever and got over it, that I'll probably see it in a different light, and I understand it's a global pandemic and it's possibly the least of the worries. But when you're trying to see the good in everything, or trying to see a positive, and you just think, it's just someone else to be knocked back, and I, as much as everyone else, wants to see the end of this, and you just wanted some positivity, and this is what we were looking forward to. We were gutted when the last match was there. The atmosphere was absolutely electric. I've never seen an atmosphere like that before, even at a Football League stadium. It was the best. You had fans from Swansea, Sheffield, all come up to watch us, and join in with us. And then to have all that taken away, it's just a little bit gutting at the minute. Like I say, I think the reaction will settle down in a couple of weeks' time or whatever, but it's still not a nice feeling to have that taken away from you.
Sean, I think, first of all, thank you for coming on the show. And I think everybody that's a football fan listens to this now. And despite anything that's going on in the world, it is truly gutting as a football fan. And I think we all can understand where you're coming from. And as you say, hopefully in a couple of weeks, when you've had a bit of time to digest it, nothing's going to quite make up for it. And I know that we're all looking at the world situation. But if this happens to Liverpool, then it will be...
It'll make me feel better. Well, don't get me wrong. It'll make me feel better, because then it's replicated throughout the Football League. But if they don't replicate that throughout the Football League, then it's just going to look embarrassing on the smaller teams. South Shields are now going to get ridiculed. Vauxhall's going to get ridiculed wherever they go next season because of this.
Sean, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate you doing that. And obviously, we can't say anything as football fans. We know how you feel. And
no, it's awkward.
Let's hope for a great season for you next year.
I'm looking forward to it already.
Brilliant. Thank you. That was Sean, a South Shields fan who Charlotte, we'll come to James in a minute, but you feel for him, don't you? You don't. There's nothing you can say. I know that there's bigger things in the world, but as a football fan, to support your club all the way through and be on the verge of promotion, it's gutting.
Yeah, definitely, especially in times like this when, like Sean said, he was hoping for a bit of positive news. I can understand. I think he was really fair in how he was feeling. But if there's anything to be taken away from this, and anyone watching and anyone listening, I implore them to go and support your non-league team. I can completely understand the sentiment Sean's feeling. It feels like the non-league community has had to go and fend for itself, and to a certain degree it has. The FA doesn't govern the Premier League and the EFL. They have a certain degree of autonomy to hang around and big discussions with broadcasters and stuff like that. But the radio silence in terms of a bailout package for the non-league and for the grassroots community, like I say, probably means that this is the decision that was made to help the clubs in the long run. And it's incredibly disappointing. I think a couple of weeks ago, if you were to ask me, I would have optimistically been counting down to the Easter bank holiday, thinking that games were going to go on. But, you just watch the news and see what's going on in Italy, see what's going on in Spain. Our battles for now lie far away from a football pitch. And like I say, it said at the very beginning, the FA had the hardest decision to make in the most unprecedented of circumstances. But I think they've ultimately made the decision for the long-term integrity of the game. And maybe if we're going to be questioning integrity at the moment, we need to be looking at the Premier League and their discussions about holding games behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Who wants to lift a trophy behind closed doors?
Yeah, it's a really, really good point, and I think everyone is holding their breath across non-league to see what the National League and the South and the North, and that's a point I want to make as well. If you want to get in touch with the show tonight, we'll try and bring David, who writes for the non-league paper, David Richardson, on to just get his thoughts and opinions on the decision today, and also the National League North and South. And James, I'm going to bring you in again now. It's a strange decision. I realise that the governing bodies are very different, but it's part of the anger tonight amongst supporters of some clubs that are doing particularly well. The fact that they are being treated differently from even the National North, South and the National League.
I think that's where most of the anger really comes into it for the fans. I mean, my heart goes out to Sean, who we were just speaking to earlier, especially for South Shields. They're a fantastic club, seeing them firsthand. I remember I got to see them play in the FA Vars a couple of years ago at Wembley. They had 14,000 travelling fans see them win the FA Vars when they played at Wembley. And it's just, I can hear the disappointment in him, and I think it echoes amongst everybody else that's got involved with this decision. And I think the anger is that they feel like it's us against them in an almost strange mentality that we're in at the moment. I think also the anger with the decision is the lack of clarity of what is going to really happen next. I think more so on a financial point of view. And I think Charlotte was just mentioning the fact that it's potentially been done to aid and help the clubs in a long-term plan going ahead for when the season will start again, whenever that may be, whether it be in August or September or whenever we can get over the brow of this horrible, horrible virus which is affecting everyday life at the moment. I think the key point of view is with this, it was never going to be an easy decision to make regardless of whatever was going to happen, whether the season was to restart again at an earlier date or the whole season would be cancelled. I think it's just an amount of bitterness at the moment because a lot of people just want normality back.
Yeah, I'm just going to read some of the messages because you've been getting in touch. Please get in touch with us across social media. Let us know your thoughts on this tonight. Let us know your thoughts on what you think the Premier League are going to do. Should everybody have responded together? What's going to happen with the National League and the National League North and South? So many comments coming in already across social media. We're putting as many as we can up on the screen. And don't forget, you can give us a call as well. The number's on the bottom of the screen. If, like Sean, you feel the need tonight to come on as a football fan and just say your piece, if you need to just have a say and get it out there for people to listen, That's what we're here for tonight. Numbers on the bottom of the screen. Give us a call and we'll get you on this evening. Right, some of the messages that have been coming in here. Hi all, Eastleigh fan here. Feel the decision is far too early. Really feel for South Shields and Worthing amongst others. I'm sure majority are happier with this decision, which is probably why this outcome has arrived. I'll be gutted if the season meant nothing, even though my team ended up finishing 17th. We'll have the memories, but they would now not mean anything. People obviously sharing that view. Callum here says, I think the top two will go up from the National North and the National South, which will infuriate everybody. That James, is another really good point. If the National League and the North and the South don't follow suit now and allow teams to get promoted, you're going to be gutted if you're in step 3 or step 4, aren't you?
Oh, I think there'll be an absolute riot if the North and the South are retained for their promotions and relegations. I think it would be extremely unfair and ethically and morally wrong for those teams in the lower leagues to be sanctioned with their seasons being null and void as a result. And the higher leagues are basically untouched as a result of this decision made today. My personal view on this matter is that if a decision has been made to abandon the seasons and null and void them for steps 3 to 6, it should be universally across the board. You can't say that lower leagues below the North and the South are affected by this decision and the other leagues above it are unaffected. This is a universal decision. It has to be that. The other clubs and the leagues above it have to follow suit, because if they don't and they carry on waiting for their seasons to be finished, there is something really, really wrong with this decision. And if it has to be brought forward, the other leagues surely have to follow suit as well. That's my opinion. I just feel it needs to be followed through from the higher leagues as well as steps 3 to 6, which have had this decision upon them today.
Don't forget, get in touch across social media. Comments all the time going across the screen from YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. You can call us tonight on the number below. And our producer will put you through and you can have your say as a football fan. That's what we're here for tonight. Grassroots non-league football and to get your say. Charlotte, I want to talk a little bit about the National League and the North and the South. Is it inevitable that they will make the same decision? I know that we were talking about timings and the fact that, you know, it's not good. They should have maybe done it together. There are obviously different circumstances in those divisions when you look at stadiums perhaps, and when you look at the National League and almost full-time most of the clubs. But is it inevitable that they're going to have to follow suit?
I think so. I mean, automatically today's decision has had an impact in that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think National League South or North teams can get relegated now.
Yeah, you're right, yeah.
So that is having an impact already. You can almost argue, well, if there's going to be no relegation, then why should there be promotion? Even within the league structure there, you're thinking that certain teams are getting treated differently. Obviously, I know it's a positive thing to be promoted, whereas, you know, you're happy if you stay in the league you are. But I think the only reason why that decision hasn't been made yet is again to do with money. And for the National League and the EFL, whether the National League is expecting some kind of financial help from the EFL, it's a point we've made. And I know a lot of the viewers have got in touch as well. And I just make the same point that if the non-league system doesn't exist, and the Premier League and the English Football League wouldn't have some of the most talented people that it does. And I think anyone watching will value the non-league game. And I just can't see how the National League will be able to not follow suit, really. I know of a number of National League clubs that are already in financial dire straits, suspending paying their players. And then you have to ask yourself, well, how does that then work? You know, if you're a Dover Athletic or a Solihull Moors fan, how would you feel knowing that your players are having their wages suspended at such a difficult time, in the hope that maybe at some point, maybe in August, maybe in September, maybe in October, like where do you draw a line? And that's why I feel like, although the decision is a difficult one, I don't really see how there isn't another choice.
Yeah, it really is fascinating hearing the views on this. Louis says making the season null and void is a joke for teams like Jersey Bulls and Vauxhall Motors. We haven't mentioned them tonight as well, in a similar position to South Shields, who have already achieved automatic promotion and in Jersey's position broken numerous league records. James, that's a really good point as well. You know, teams like that who have worked tirelessly and they've broken the records. I know that this is going to divide opinion, and we did a poll an hour before the start of the show, and it was 50-50, and that's how much it divides opinion. But is there nothing that could have been done for those clubs that have already achieved promotion?
I think the only way you could probably, I would say, I hate to say this, but soften the blow as much as the decision we've seen today where clubs aren't going to get promoted, I would at least give those clubs the financial reward, at least, of winning the league. So that would be a slightly lesser blow on a financial point of view, to say that these clubs that have won their promotions fairly and squarely, beaten the records going against them, at least give them the financial reward and backing to at least say to them, okay, this season has been completely wiped out because of unprecedented events, but you will still get the financial reward of winning the league. The downside of that is if clubs are being rewarded for being first or second and getting the financial implications, what about the other clubs which are also going to struggle without the financial help that's required? Again, I reiterate what I said a little bit earlier. It was always going to be an extremely difficult decision to make, both financially and mentally, for a lot of people who volunteer with their clubs. So I think we're never going to get a definitive, proper, correct answer for this, just because of the unprecedented nature which we're all experiencing at the moment. And again, I'll say it again, this is an argument which will just go on and on and on.
We haven't had any announcements, Charlotte, about the finances. I know people are asking a lot about. There's two things that people are asking across social media. One is finance. You know, will these clubs be supported financially because of this? Is there going to be a financial, soften the blow, as James said? And we've had some messages on social media to that reflection as well. And also contracts for players. You know, to players now not have contracts because the season is officially up, and how does that work?
Yeah, I think obviously it's a massive question. I've seen one of the questions that's sprung to my mind as well is, if you null and void a season, well, what happens with all the fines? Are they null and void as well? It'll be interesting to see what the FA do, because there is a big black hole in the finances of a lot of clubs now. I mean, when it comes down to contracts, I think you'll find for a lot of clubs that won't be an issue. The players will probably be sort of on non-contracts, and unfortunately it's brutal, but they just will suspend them and those players won't get paid unless, obviously, now with the Chancellor's statement last week, they might be able to get 80% of their wages, but contracted players will still be having to be paid. And I think, again, that is part of the problem. If you've got a big squad and you've gone for the promotion push and you're still contracted to play these players until sort of mid-May, that's a huge lump sum you've got to find from somewhere, with no immediate cash flow. So that is, again, where the clubs will come to financial difficulties. You've not got any gate money receipt, you've not got any secondary spend. Non-league football clubs can't depend on the sort of income generation that the Premier League and the EFL has, or, big lump sums from TV broadcasting deals. So it's really, really tough. And I imagine, again, that's why the decision has been made as early. And people are right to question why so early. Maybe why not leave it for a couple of weeks? Let's be optimistic. But I think that is predominantly why the decision has been made, so clubs can now sort of restructure. We have no idea what the 2020-21 season is going to look like. We have no idea when it's going to start, what shape it might take. But at least for some clubs, today will have been a bit of a financial relief in terms of they can plan and move forward.
Yeah, and that is a really good point that you make, which is that the decision. So we're going up to a point where in 10 minutes we're having a national applause for the NHS, the fantastic job that they're doing. we're reading the news today and seeing the deaths today in this country alone from coronavirus. We know that there are extreme circumstances in play at the moment, and that this is an unprecedented case of a football season that really goes into insignificance. But if you're tuning in and thinking, well, because of everything that's going on, why are we having this discussion? It is around those points of support financially for clubs at the moment, because even though, as Charlotte said, that the decision is probably going to be to the relief of some clubs that can now shape themselves for the following season, the revenue lost this season for those clubs that absolutely rely on it. And let's be really honest about it. We can talk about TV deals as much as we want, and I realise that's a big thing in the Premier League, but the clubs don't rely on fans coming in and actually, the gate receipts in the Premier League. They don't. That's just not what happens. So these clubs, believe me, they really do rely on the support of people coming in and watching the games. They've now been told today there will be no more games this season. So what we're discussing here is not the fact that this is insignificant compared to the worldwide pandemic. What we're discussing is the decisions that have been made today that perhaps, just perhaps, could have been delayed to see if there is any way that these clubs could get more revenue for the rest of this season. And, as we touched on, those clubs that have achieved so much this year, of course, we're going to feel their pain as well. And what we're really interested in is today could have been the start of a real precedent that is going to have to happen around the footballing world, because Leagues 2 and 1 are in difficult positions as well. Let us know your thoughts. We want you to get in touch with the show tonight. So many comments coming across social media. I'll read some more of those in a moment. Do get in touch as well. The number's on the screen. If you want to be on the show tonight, if you want to have your view as a grassroots and non-league fan, please do that. We're going to be speaking to a non-league chairman in the next 15 minutes. We're also going to be speaking to David Richardson, who is an editor of the non-league paper. And obviously reaction from him will be fascinating, especially on that question of the National South and the National League. For a moment, I just want to divert the attention away from non-league onto the Premier League. Something that we discussed earlier in the week. It has an effect, because non-league have come out and said today, that's it from steps 3 to 6. What happens in the Premier League and the Championship now is going to have more of a bearing on the way clubs and fans feel at lower levels, Charlotte. Especially,
yeah, definitely.
especially as South Shields, like Sean said, have been denied that opportunity, and everyone's going to be watching Liverpool now very carefully. Yeah,
I think it is hard. Like, I don't want to keep reiterating the point, but money talks in this game. It's as simple as that. I made the point on Tuesday that ultimately I think in a few months' time, when hopefully we are over the peak of this pandemic, and there's nothing to say that it won't rear its head again. There's been sort of research that suggests there might be a sort of winter spike of this as well. I just question, what is there to celebrate from winning the title this season? What is there to celebrate? When Liverpool lift that trophy, they'll be very lucky not to have lost a chunk of their fan base. And I don't want to sound too sombering, and I don't want to sound like I'm being over dramatic, but that is the reality of the situation, that these football clubs we will all eventually know someone that is affected by this virus, and I just question whether it will have that euphoric sense even if the season does get played out and Liverpool win and so on. I appreciate it's really, really difficult, and it's like I say, a kick in the teeth and all of those expressions. And I can understand why clubs want to maybe explore their legal opportunities around it. I do completely understand, but I just think ultimately it was a decision that's been made with the best intentions.
Yeah, and I know that that's a stance that you've taken from the beginning of the show, and respect that as well. Say divided opinion on our poll. But we're going to stay on for longer because we want to hear from a chairman of a non-league club. We want to hear from David Richardson, who obviously knows the National League and the North and the South very well, being an editor of the non-league paper. And I want to get his take on it. I want yours as well. Do call us. The number is on the bottom of the screen. You can get in touch with us and have your say, just like Sean did earlier on. James Cummins is with us as well on the phone. And James, you can feel when we talk to Sean, we could understand. I know that there'll be so many fans that will watch this and are fans of the Premier League and will say, well, yeah, but it's professional football. The money that's involved, the broadcasters, and this, that, and the other. But ultimately, a team like South Shields to not get a trophy and Liverpool to be given the trophy, what is the difference? Why should we be doing that?
I don't think we should be doing that, in brute honesty. Like I said just earlier on in the show, if a precedent has been set in such an example like we've seen this afternoon with steps 3 to 6, the rightful thing should be that it should be carried out throughout the higher leagues. That is the fairest way of making sure that the decision which has been made is on an even scale. It wouldn't be right to award any team in the higher league their title because it's not the right time to do so. I understand that football affects a lot of people and is a staple diet of a lot of people's lives on a level than what most people would wish to put forward. But now is not the time to do that. We have to understand that there are, not being sort of blunt, there is a greater emphasis at the moment rather than lifting a title. Yes, the hard work has been into nothing. Yes, the financial side could be worse off. But at this moment in time, we need to concentrate our efforts on the most important pressing matters at the moment, and that is dealing with the coronavirus in general. And we need to concentrate as well on a strategy and a plan for the resumption of football when that happens. And however rushed the decision may be, however the answers and the inevitable questions that will come from this will be difficult to try and take in, we have to start somewhere. And at this moment in time, the question is, how do we rebuild the league for next season? Where do we start? And you need to start somewhere. And however difficult or how hard the road may be for a lot of clubs and a lot of fans and a lot of people who are employed by the clubs, you have to start somewhere. And the decision which has been made today is, I think, in the long term, the right answer. It just needs to be respected by the other leagues, because if it doesn't, it's totally, totally wrong and unfair on the rest.
We're going to speak to David Richardson from the National League and the National League South and North very shortly. Don't forget to keep your messages coming in as well. Our producer will put many of those on the screen, and also you can get in touch via calling the number and you can get your say onto the show. That's what we're doing here tonight. Charlotte, before we speak to David, just want to pick up on Sean's point. He's on the screen here. It's a question. He says, what happens if the virus fizzles out in the summer? The season starts again, only for it to return and the season once again be suspended. Do they then cancel the season 2 and expunge all the results for a second year running? Has anybody thought about that? And I guess that goes on to the question of, could we not have just finished this season even if it was in September, October? But I know there are financial implications, of course, to that being done and then next season being delayed. But he's got a point, hasn't he? We still don't know if the season will get interrupted next year.
Yeah, certainly so. It's a valid point. I think maybe, again, a point to reiterate is that the Football Association hasn't made this decision blindsided. It will have had conversations and it would have had insight from the government and their departments there. And, God, I hope that come June it does fizz out, and that would be amazing. I don't think it will. I don't really hold many hopes for us starting the season in August or September. It's uncharted territory. I can't see mass gatherings at football games for a good few months. But again, hopefully we might be wrong. But I think the decision that the governing bodies will make will be in line with all the health and guidelines and the science behind it. And hopefully, I can't imagine games being sanctioned if there was any sort of fear or threat of an imminent lockdown situation like we've witnessed over the past few weeks, because this has accelerated so quickly. Would any of us have thought we'd be in this position a couple of months ago? Well, even a month ago, I don't think we would.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's accelerated extremely quickly, and hopefully progress will be made with vaccines and things like that. But we are talking about the decision that has been made today, and also looking to the National League North and South, and seeing what decisions that they're going to make. I'm delighted to say that David Richardson joins us on the line now, one of the editors of the non-league paper. Very good evening to you, David. David, are you there? Can we bring David in? I think we're not having too much luck on the phones lines tonight. David was definitely there. David, can you hear me? Let's go back to James, and who definitely can hear me. James has been on the phone all the way through.
Guys, I just have to interrupt you now. I have just seen one of the most beautiful, beautiful sights I have ever seen. Of course, at 8 o'clock, it was the nationwide appreciation for the NHS and the key workers. And I was just taking a moment just to be leaning outside of my window where I live. And at 8 o'clock on the dot, I have never, ever seen such an appreciation of people all around the area that I live in. Almost every single household was clapping and cheering. And that's an unbelievable moment to have, to be honest. So it's one of those moments where you'll look back on it and you think, I was there, and it just took place. And it was a very, 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 very magical moment. So away from football, I'm extremely pleased that took place, and that was a fitting tribute to those people working within the NHS and those key workers who are carrying on, keeping the country going at this extremely, extremely difficult time.
Yeah, well said, James, and certainly, we're here tonight discussing football and things that are important to people for mental health and for other reasons, and it affects people's lives, but it certainly is put into perspective the discussions that we're having when things like that happen, and James described it so well there, and what a moment, and everybody in the NHS deserves that for the job that they're doing. We're trying to speak to David Richardson actually on the phone. David, we're hoping that you're there, but I'm fearing that you're going to not be there. Let's see if we can bring David on. In the meantime, Charlotte, we're talking about the National League South and North, and what they might do. But I want to bring in a message from Richard, who just says, where do I get the money to renovate our pitch at Burgess Hill Town? We totally rely on the gate and bar take-ins. We mentioned the gate, and obviously secondary spend on the bar and things are important too. It's got a really good point, hasn't he? Like we said, these teams at this level, not like the Premier League, they rely on people coming through the gate.
Am I on?
Hello, David. Do you know, I was about to go to Charlotte, but I'm going to go to you now instead. David, thanks for joining us. But Richard, we'll come back to your point in a minute. David, I want to talk to you about the decision today. What was your take on it?
Yeah, I think overall it's largely the right decision.
Yeah, Richard makes a really good point, and I sympathise with that position. I mean, that's also
or steps 3 to 6 rather to call an end to the leagues. I think it was always going to be a decision either way, whether they carried on and tried to wait it out and resume at some point. I think it was always going to be a decision that didn't please everyone, and I think probably the FA and leagues have tried to play it safe in this instance. They, could you imagine the outcry of and complaints towards the FA had rumbled on for another month or 2 or possibly 3, in the hope that the season could have somehow restarted, only for then during that time for clubs to go to the wall and have serious financial problems, some of which already have that. And I think then, had it got to that point, the the outcry would have been even greater, perhaps, than it is at this moment of people disputing the decision. Obviously, the discussion will be around should teams have been promoted on points per game, the Jersey Bulls and the Vauxhall Motors situation of them having already won promotion. But I think ultimately, by acting quickly, I think it is the right decision.
One of the things that we haven't touched on too much tonight, but we did when we were doing the show on Monday, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts, James and Charlotte's, on this. We've talked about the decision today to stop the league, and we talked about the reasons why that needed to happen between steps 3 and 6. And I'm sure those running the league would reiterate your points, David, and say, yeah, that needed to happen for these reasons. There are certain clubs that are going to feel the pressure off them right now. Why couldn't we have made a decision that, having played 75% of the season, all right, some clubs haven't played as many games and some clubs have got more difficult run-ins, but we're in unprecedented circumstances. And instead of everybody taking a breath and accepting that we've finished the league and we're not going to count anything and we're going to start again, why couldn't we have just said, right, we're 75% of the way through, a huge amount of effort has gone into this, we're going to stop it now, we have to, so everyone still gets that same financial relief, but we're going to stop it as it is. And you know what? There's a world pandemic. So stopping it now, you got to live with it. It's unprecedented circumstances, but we have to stop it now as it is and just reward those teams that are already in the promotion places and those that are in the relegation places. Just have to accept it's a unique season. Why scrap it completely?
Yeah, it's obviously a very good point. I think probably the main thing is that in football, and particularly non-league, it's impossible to predict what's going to happen in games, and I think probably no matter how far clear in points teams may be, I think ultimately you don't know what's going to happen. Had teams that maybe were a point ahead or level on goal difference but were top of the league, like Satchimar in the Southern League, I mean, is that right to just give them promotion without playing out the whole season? I'm not sure, but I do really feel that there must have been some way for Jersey Bulls and Vauxhall Motors to be rewarded, given that they had actually earned promotion. That was done mathematically. That they were going up. So that's, for me, that's sort of my biggest frustration about it, really, and that they have actually earned that and won't get rewarded. So for other clubs, yes, it's really difficult. Melbourne, Tiptree, 14 points clear. South Shields, another one well clear at their top of the league. I think it's 12 points. But they haven't quite got over the line. And I know it's awful to almost say that, and it's awful probably for managers and players and fans and people involved in running these clubs to hear that. But it's not over until it's over, unfortunately. I don't know whether that is quite the answer to your question, but I think those are my feelings anyway.
So I'm just going to put that one to James first of all. James, as I just asked David, couldn't we have been in a situation where we said, look, enough of it has been played for us to actually say, well, I know it's not going to please everyone. This is not going to please everybody, but at least reward those clubs that have, even over the game so far, been in the promotion places.
I think you should reward those clubs which have been in the promotion places, but as I said earlier on, the only realistic way to reward those clubs that have been in the promotion places is to reward them financially. That's the only logistical solution that we can come to at this particular time. I think that would be the only way to soften the blow of the season being cancelled and effectively scrapped as a result. I don't think you can find any other way of coming to a reasonable conclusion for these teams which have won their championships outright. If we were in any other situation, we could potentially have had a different outcome, but in this time we're at the moment, there is no actual outcome. I think, give or take the nature of the decision being made by the FA and the league officials, I think they haven't potentially even reached that stage yet where they will come up with a financial package for those clubs who have won their league, or those clubs which will be financially stricken as a result of today's decision. I still think we're going to have a long, long way to go before we reach any formal conclusion financially with these clubs which have either won or need the money. I think what we're going to see now is just see the backlash from not only from clubs and players and officials, but from fans. And I think the decision needs to be made when this has potentially died down. But with that, when is going to be the appropriate time for this to be made?
I want to reiterate a point just before I ask David something about the National League and the North and the South. I want to reiterate the world situation that we're in. We've just seen a national applause for our NHS. We're in a world pandemic. And do realise, everybody on this channel, and I'm sure everybody messaging in and everybody calling in, does realise that this is far, far bigger than football. What we're talking about here is not getting carried away, even as football fans and people that love the game, of, you know, this needed to happen, or this is the biggest thing in the world. Clubs are upset, people are upset. We're not saying that. People are upset and people will be disappointed, but we all know the bigger picture. What we're discussing tonight is, could something have been done differently? And it's all about opinions, and I know it's a very difficult situation, but we're particularly talking about, why couldn't those teams that are already in promotion places be promoted? If you're going to say that it's an extraordinary season, we're going to wipe everything off, then you can say it's an extraordinary season, we're going to finish it now. And the other thing that we're going to talk about now with David is the impact of today's decision on other leagues. Everybody would have seen this. Everybody will be looking at this. Why have the National League North and South and the National League not come out and made the decision with the rest of non-league? Because they are part of non-league. And I think that's what will frustrate fans even more than Liverpool and the talk of them winning the title and this, that and the other. Non-league is non-league. So why have the National League not come out jointly and made their decisions being part of non-league?
Yeah, I think the answer to that one is because of the two promotion places going up to the EFL, which complicates things. Obviously, two come down from League Two. There's the situation with Bury being expelled from League One, but that's sort of largely irrelevant in this case, because two will still be going up regardless from the National League. So I think that is the reason why that they want to see what the EFL are doing. I don't really know too much more than that, but I think that is the general consensus of the National League is that they're sort of almost adhering to. They've got to liaise with the EFL really as well, because they also have a link with that. Rather, you know, step 3 to 6 are all amongst the same non-league bracket really.
Do you think, just finally before I let you go, David, because I know it's a really busy time for you with everything happening with the non-league paper, do you think that it is inevitable that the National League South and North and National League will have to follow suit?
It's really difficult to tell, to be honest. I'm really not sure about that. I think it does perhaps put pressure on them, seeing that decision today. I did expect steps 3 to and below really to end this season. I just couldn't see a way that it could continue, and sort of almost by each passing day, I do think it does become more difficult for the National League to try and aim to restart, because we simply don't know how long the coronavirus is going to go on for, when the peak is, when it's going to die down, etc. It's pointless making dates, making it May 31st to start playing games, or look at that as a potential start date, because we don't know, and that's the issue really. And I think that's really why the step 3 to 6 leagues made that decision today, because they don't know what the future holds, but they can affect things now, which is the safety of their clubs. And like I said earlier, I think they took the safe option to do it. I think there is quite a big gulf between steps 2 and 1, which will play into things. Obviously, the majority of clubs that Step 1 are full time. Whether that puts them more at risk because of having more staff, having more contracts to honour, that's something to take into account as well. But a lot of these clubs at Step 2, particularly the ones that maybe have come up from Step 3 in recent years, who aren't that used to the level, they could really find this sort of period difficult, really. So I don't completely really know what the National League will do, but I think after today's event, it does put pressure on them to perhaps come out with a similar outcome.
Yeah, we'll watch with interest, certainly over the next few days and the next week. David, thank you ever so much for coming on. David Richardson from the non-league paper and also part of Back of the Nets team. Thank you, David. Right, before we go, we really wanted to speak to a chairman of a non-league club. So we're going to bring Gary White, the chairman of Heybridge Swifts and a friend of the show, on to get his thoughts. Obviously, Heybridge Swifts last year won the playoffs and didn't get promoted, so he knows all about the way some of these clubs will be feeling, albeit in different circumstances. Before we bring Gary on, I'm just going to go back to Charlotte. Really interesting message from Callum, who says, I think those that have already been qualified to get promotion, the leagues above, will find a space for them and factor that issue in for next season. I wonder if there's any opportunity that might happen, whether these teams that have mathematically been promoted will actually end up having a space for them or not.
I think it's treading into difficult waters there, because you can't make a decision to void a league but say, oh well, no, we're going to make an exception for those or for them. And I think it just gets tricky and it's cutthroat. It's a harsh decision in the eyes of those clubs, and I don't want to sound ruthless myself, that I can completely sympathise, but these just are completely unprecedented times. This is an unprecedented decision, and God forbid and God willing it will be a decision that governing bodies will not have to ever make again. But I just think ultimately in a couple of weeks' time, once the emotion has maybe settled, I think it is the right decision. And when you start manoeuvring things, you then add another fixture in for certain teams but not others, and then it just goes on and on, whereas this is probably the decision to be made for now, in the time that's made with a eye cast very much towards the future.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think exactly that. It was a good point, but I think that once the season is done and results expunged, as the word that they've used, then that is clearly it. And somebody who knows a little bit about being promoted and then not going up is Gary White, the chairman of Heybridge Swifts. So bring Gary in now. Gary, a very good evening to you.
Good evening.
Obviously, it's a really strange day for non-league football at steps 3 to 6. I've got many questions for you. First of all, I'm going to ask you about how those chairmen may be feeling that have already been promoted, only to see the season be wiped out.
Well, they must have been fearing the worst, I should imagine. It's not something that happened overnight like it did with us, where we'd won the playoff and then had to wait on the result of the game the next day. So it was a sort of excitement for 24 hours and then obviously huge disappointment afterwards. But I guess a lot of the clubs would have been preparing themselves for this, and over the last 2 or 3 weeks, as time went on, and obviously the severity of the virus, became more apparent. It was clear that it became fairly clear that there's no way you could finish the season for its fans, obviously. But I do feel for clubs generally that clearly had one promotion virtually, and also cup trophies. FA Trophy. I think Concord Rangers were due to play in the semi-final. I'm not sure what the outcome of that is going to be, but huge money spinners for clubs like that to have got to the semi-final.
So let me ask you a question as a chairman, because there is some confusion today amongst players, maybe supporters of non-league clubs at those levels, and that is that some people are saying that this is going to be detrimental because, just like Richard said at Burgess Hill, we've now got no gate money and we've got no secondary spend for all those fixtures. Yeah. They're not going to happen now, and we did think that they might happen. And then there's the other point of view, which is people saying that clubs will be relieved that the season's ended so that they can release their players and that the financial pressures are released. As a chairman, try to talk us through what is the situation at a football club right now. Are you relieved or are you not happy?
No, we're obviously we're not happy at all. We're in it to play football and to compete at the highest level we can, and enjoy seeing the place open and people using the bar and generating revenue. And obviously at the moment it's not a ghost town. So no, it's awful really. We had a number of games left to play, and when we've got a good squad, a good squad of people, we want to keep that squad together as far as possible for next season. And that's always a difficult thing, keeping people interested after such a long break. It's going to be freakishly long, isn't it? Really. So I'm certainly not relieved. No. I guess that there's a bit of clarity there, and if we were top of the league now or we're flying very high, then I might be thinking differently. But I'm certainly not relieved. It's a funny situation, and I think football takes second place really to everything else that's going on in the world. And I think the most important thing is containing this virus and not seeing some of the terrible things that apparently are going on now in Spain that I'm told could be happening here fairly soon. So really, that's more my concern at this stage.
And just to clarify that a financial question, have the league said anything? Will there be any money coming in from the league? Is there any sort of rescue package, or are clubs just going to have to deal with? Obviously we've said this so many times on this show tonight. We understand there are bigger issues, and health is the most important thing. We're not trying to make light of that and say that football is more important, because of course it's not. But what we're trying to ascertain tonight is just the decisions that are being made for football have an effect. Will clubs be worried about their future given that these games?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, certainly clubs with a number of contracted players, where they've got to pay the money, and that's going to be a big concern there. Although there is government help there now under the 80% rule, where if those employees have to be laid off or whatever because they can't work, it's clear they can't. I believe that there's grounds for them to get 80% of that back from the government, and that's being sort of worked out at the moment, the mechanics of how that actually happens. Also, there's the other potential for clubs that qualify for small business rates relief, which I think the majority will do, where their rateable value of their premises are below 51,000, excuse me, or below I think 15,000. There's one lot of relief where you can get a grant of 10,000, and if it's between 15 and 51,000 rateable value, I think the grant is available at 25,000. So that is quite a fair bit of assistance. Obviously, it won't help the clubs that pay that a week in wages, one or two, but so there is help that's on the way. I guess really at our sort of level, step 4, you don't really have many contracted players. They're very much paid on a week-to-week basis or via expenses and what have you. So it's less of a problem, less of an issue. But for Conference South, National South clubs that maybe are paying 20,000-25,000 a month in wages upwards, with very little income coming in now, that's a different story.
Gary, thank you ever so much for coming on to the show tonight, and it's really nice to hear from somebody who's a chairman. Thank you, and I know that we'll speak again very soon. Gary White, the chairman of Heybridge Swifts Football Club. We loads of comments in tonight. Thank you ever so much. James, just final thoughts from you. Difficult situation for all of football. We knew this was coming. Today we've got some clarity, as Gary said, positively. Let's take the positives. There's been clarity, and the league have acted. And many times fans and media give criticism to leagues for not making decisions and not acting. They've acted, they've made the decision, and it's come early.
That's one positive to take away from today's decision, is that we get regular comments regarding the inefficiency and the inactive nature of the officials of the leagues. And we've seen a definitive decision made today, whether it is good or bad. We've seen an outcome. And in the long term, it is potentially the right thing to do. the implications of continuing the league and continuing football onwards beyond its rightful place, given the circumstances, would potentially have had a drastic effect going forward into recovering football and recovering the respective leagues as a whole. So it is refreshing in one respect to see that the league has acted in the way that they have and made a definitive decision today to cancel the respective leagues in question again, 3 to 6. But the major question which will always hang above this decision today is, what are the ramifications as a direct result of going down this road? And only time will tell with this particular decision today, and we'll only yet to see what the full outcome will be for those clubs and the people directly affected with those teams affected by today's outright decision.
James, thank you ever so much for coming on and being on the phone tonight. Really great to hear from you. As always, James Cummins, thank you.
Thanks. Pleasure as always, mate.
Right, Charlotte, just me and you left now, just to wrap up really quickly, because we've been on for a long time tonight. It's been a big day for non-league football. It's been a big day for those steps 3 to 6. We believe that the day for the rest of the non-league is obviously going to come. Like James said, we've had a decision. You mentioned it at the very top of the show. They've made a decision, and there will be a lot of relief from clubs that decision's been made, and then they can now look forward, hopefully, to next season.
Yeah, I think clarity being the word, relief to a certain degree, but yeah, just clarity and at least a forward-thinking plan of action, and one that has been done in consultation with the clubs as well. Each club in the division was able to fill in a questionnaire outlining how this was impacted upon them financially, what their preferred means would be, and it's tough for a lot of people this evening and callers we've had on and people commenting. It's tough, it's brutal, but what lies ahead of us in the next couple of months is far more important than football. And I think if we can take anything away from this, it is, like I said on Tuesday night, perhaps an opportunity to evaluate what success looks like for non-league. Actually, would a season that delays and goes slightly into the summer be beneficial in terms of boosting crowds, secondary sales, stuff like that? Do we need all of the cup competitions? What value do they bring to football clubs? But ultimately, I think what this show keeps underlining, and I applaud you, Ben, for doing it each and every night this week, is it provides a platform for people, and it is a precious commodity, and one we all feel really passionately about. Football is our sport, and it's something we love. And I think one thing we won't take for granted when life does resume to normality is our non-league football clubs. In the same way, we will, really treasure our local businesses. We have seen an incredible moment this evening with the NHS. We won't take these things for granted anymore, and hopefully there will be more positives in the future.
Yeah, you're totally right, Charlotte, and obviously you play a big part in the show as well. We thank everybody that has been on tonight, and also to thank you for joining us and all your comments and your calls and your messages. Hopefully we've got through most of them this evening. A big day for non-league football. We're here for grassroots and the non-league game. We love to be the community, and we love to be your community, and we'll continue to do so. Plenty more shows on the way. We're back tomorrow night. We've got a brand new show called Coach's Corner. You can catch the first episode on our YouTube channel right now. And I'll be joined by Peter Augustine tomorrow night as we dissect the role of attacking fullbacks in the modern game. And tomorrow it is the turn of defending against teams like Liverpool who play with attacking fullbacks. And we'll have an actual practice plan for you to take away. So if you're a grassroots coach, definitely one not to miss tomorrow. Once again, thank you for joining in the show tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure, as it always is. And we'll see you tomorrow.